Hello. Today I want to continue my discussion of the initial establishment of the Baha'i Faith in the West. This is from an essay I published back in 2004, the Baha'i Faith in the West survey. Another useful source is an even more ancient essay I wrote back in 1982 on the American Baha'i Community from 1894 to 1917, and I'll give the details in the notes below the video. You could also, if you want to raise a short summary, see Chapter 7, the early American Baha'i Community, in my book, The Babi and Baha'i Religions. Again, details below. So the period of the initial establishment of the Baha'i Faith in the West I've dated to 1894-1921. In the first video, we discussed the Khairullah period up to 1900, the Baha'ist group, and Abdu'l-Baha's leadership. We'll now return to the question of organization, Abdu'l-Baha's visit to North America in 1912, the war years, and activities outside the United States. The question of organization was in itself a source of disagreement amongst the early American Baha'is. Nevertheless, limited forms of organization gradually emerged, both in the various local groups and nationally. Many of the local groups began to hold regular business meetings and to elect executive boards to manage their activities. Nationally, the most significant developments were the formation in 1909 of an annual delegate assembly, the Baha'i Temple Unity, which took responsibility for the construction of a proposed Baha'i House of Worship, or Mashq al-Azhar, near Chicago, and the initiation of a regular national Baha'i periodical, the Baha'i News, soon retitled Star of the West. That was from 1910 onwards. The leading role in both of these developments was played by the Baha'is of Chicago. For many years, the largest local group, Baha'i publishing activity, also came to be centered in Chicago. These organizational developments may be assumed to have fostered a growing sense of cohesion as a religious group for the Baha'is, both locally and nationally. I should say in passing that the conception of a distinctive Baha'i community gradually emerged. As sociologists and Baha'is have developed varying definitions of the basic sociological term community. For modern Baha'is, community refers to any centrally administered collectivity of Baha'is. For example, the local Baha'i community of Los Angeles, the national Baha'i community of Canada, the world Baha'i community. By contrast, sociologists generally use the term community to refer to a relatively large group of people who live and work together and whose basic needs are largely satisfied within the group, for example, a local village community. As the term is both ubiquitous in Baha'i literature and is of use as a general referent, the present work employs the modern Baha'i usage of community rather than the sociological one. But note that most Baha'i communities are not, in fact, communities in a sociological sense. Organization also provided a new basis for campaigns of activity, such as that of propagating the Baha'i teachings, hitherto largely regarded as a matter of individual initiative. Under Abdu'l-Baha's guidance, and in contrast to the secrecy of the Khairullah period, the propagation of the Baha'i Faith, teaching as it came to be called, came to be a major focus of activity. This included regular discussion groups in believers' homes and more formal public meetings. Initially, there were also many contacts with sympathetic metaphysical groups, New Thought, Theosophy, Divine Science, and so on. And later, as the Baha'is became better known and the basis of their appeal broadened, increasing contact with liberal Christian churches, as well as with movements concerned with social issues such as peace and the advancement of women and of African Americans. In 1912, Abdu'l-Baha came to North America. He stayed for 10 months, from April to December, and visited Baha'i communities in various parts of the United States and Canada. This visit was of incomparable significance to the Baha'is. He was their master, the living exemplar of their religion. He enthused his followers, reiterated over and over again the fundamentals of the Baha'i Faith, renewed the sense of Baha'i community, and instilled a tremendous sense of urgency to spread the Baha'i teachings. He also established new links with progressive religious and social groups and attracted widespread and generally sympathetic public attention. With Abdu'l-Baha's visit, the number of Baha'is increased. After his departure, the level of enthusiasm and activity remained high. Some systematic plans for missionary expansion were made, and a scheme for communal funding of itinerant missionary teachers was initiated. By 1916, the Baha'is were able to report a membership of 2,884 in the United States, this figure seemingly both including and excluding large numbers of sympathizers and peripheral members. Abdu'l-Baha had predicted war, and the commencement of the European War in 1914, only 2 years after his visit, gave the American Baha'is new impetus to their activities. The urgent need for the Baha'i teachings was clearly demonstrated. For many of the Baha'is, the war also assumed apocalyptic importance. Khairullah had predicted that the promised Baha'i millennium, the most great peace, would be established in 1917, and this had remained an apocryphal Baha'i belief. American entry into the war in 1917 was therefore seen as being filled with eschatological import by at least some of the Baha'is. It also acted as a catalyst for two major dissensions within the community, between, first of all, Baha'i pacifists and those who felt it their patriotic duty to support the war effort, and then between the supporters and opponents of the Chicago Baha'i Reading Room, a topic I'll briefly mention in a later video. These divisions were partly healed and largely overshadowed by the renewal of correspondence with Abdu'l-Baha after the war was over. Calling the Baha'is to work for communal unity, Abdu'l-Baha also gave them a new vision of worldwide missionary activity in a series of letters called the Tablets of the Divine Plan. A new campaign of teaching began within North America, and several individuals migrated overseas to further their religion. There was a sense of a new beginning, which continued even after the communal trauma occasioned by Abdu'l-Baha's death in November 1921. Up to now, we've been discussing basically what was going on in the United States, so I need to add a note on activities outside the US. The early growth of the Baha'i Faith in the West was almost entirely confined to the USA. Moreover, much of the impetus for activity outside the United States came from Americans, and in most instances the initial establishment of Baha'i groups was the work of expatriate Americans who became Baha'is, as in Paris and London, or of American Baha'is who migrated as missionary teachers of their religion, what modern Baha'is refer to as pioneers. Baha'i groups were thus established in England and France, both prior to 1900, Hawaii from 1901, Canada from 1902, Germany from 1905, Japan from 1914, and Australia from 1920. Only the Baha'i groups in Germany displayed the dynamism of the American Baha'i groups, however. There were individual converts of great ability and dedication in both England and France, but overall these new Baha'i groups remained very small and made no significant inroads into their host societies. This was particularly the case with the Paris group, most of whose members in the early days were expatriate Americans. Even Abdu'l-Baha's two visits to Europe from August to December in 1911 and December 1912 to June 1913 did not lead to any expansion comparable to that which had occurred in the United States. There was also a little organizational development. So that's what I'm going to say for the moment. If you want a general overview of Baha'i history, then my Babi and Baha'i religions from Cambridge is still useful. And then there's a short summary in my Baha'i Faith, a short history from One World. More general accounts of the Baha'i Faith. You can see an introduction to the Baha'i Faith, again from Cambridge, and a concise encyclopedia of the Baha'i Faith from One World. So many thanks to you for listening, and particular thanks to my patrons for their kind support and encouragement, without which I wouldn't be able to make these videos. And if you want to support my channel, you're very welcome to do so. Like, comment and share on the videos. Subscribe if you want to be notified of future videos. I'll give Patreon and PayPal links below if you want to provide practical support. Next week we'll talk about organizational transformation in roughly the period 1922 to 1934. Have a good day.